Morning. I'm Michael Burns. I'm chair of the Fargo Historic Preservation Commission. I call this meeting of the commission to order for the September 18th meeting. The first order of business is the agenda as the approval of the minutes from August.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Next item on the agenda is the 506 Broadway North Cowboy Jacks, I believe. Is there someone here to present the project? And if you would come up to the podium and state your name.
Austin Morris, Enclave Development. The application is for a storefront grant for a few portions of side on a historic building. This is the original historic building, 100-year-old building with 3 sides that are open and available for this grant. It needs work. It's been unkempt for many, many years. And in the end, after the full project is done, it'll be combined in an adaptive reuse style with a new building to the south. And the new building will be the Cowboy Jack's bar. The historic building will be the historic portion of the bar restaurant. So in order for the project to work financially, we looked for every opportunity that we could to improve the historic building as opposed to just cleaning it off and having it look okay. We really want it to sing, so that's the purpose of this application.
Any comments?
Just one is my project that I'm working on personally, so I would probably have to recuse myself for going on this.
Okay. Thank you.
You mentioned you want the historic building to sing. Can you describe that a bit in architectural terms?
That's a great question. Tuck pointing, replace all the windows to bring back some of the historic feel of the building. The windows are shot, they're terrible. And I don't know if Ben has anything else we're doing to the building. Is that kind of the basics? Okay, on the front facade, there's the storefront portion along Broadway that'll get a new metal, is it a panel for where the surrounding the windows or above them? And the brick.
I'm curious, why is there no elevator?
As the code reads, it's allowed to not have one because the accommodations are equal on the main floor as in the second. There's a difference between the two.
How about ADA though?
Because it is you're allowed to have upstairs without service because there's no different accommodations.
Okay, what you're saying is the service on the first floor is it matches the second
Correct.
floor, so yeah, there's no advantage. Yeah.
Yes, my question is why there wasn't a historic photo included, because this is a storefront grant that if you're using federal funds for 106 that you need to abide by the Secretary of Interior guidelines.
The front of the building is obviously the entire front of the building fronting Broadway is exposed. The back of the building remains fully visible. And then on the side of the building, the appendage or attachment to it is one level with a rooftop above that. So there'll be some spillover traffic onto the roof on the south side of the building. So what would be exposed would be the front, the back, as well as the second floor of the south side.
Right. But, so in order to get the storefront grant, because this is attached to really federal funds, it needs to abide by the Secretary of Interior guidelines. And that's ultimately what we're approving. It's not necessarily that we're approving this design, it's how accurate it is to historic integrity. And that's why we would approve or not approve the storefront grant. So it has to go back to the Secretary of Interior
Yep.
guidelines. That's the catch in this. So I was wondering if there was any digging into what it looked like originally, historically?
It's my understanding, and we can do more research on that, but the front facade should be very close to historically relevant. It's just ugly, but
I mean, does anyone know what it looked like originally? With-
we have to look. I don't know. Do we have any documentation? We understand that we have to abide by that in order to get approved for federal funds, of course. This is our first storefront grant. We just, it's our understanding that there's been a number of applications, whether it be multiple sides of a 3-story building or the front facade of a retail store.
Because this one I'm assuming is going to be just related to the original, not necessarily to the new edition. Right?
Just the original. Yep.
So I would have liked to have seen at least a historic photo included in the packet.
Okay, we have a black and white one. Okay. Matt Breen, do you have one just hanging out in your pocket?
I was just looking up one now.
Well, so I pulled these up yesterday. If you go to the National or the Institute of Archives, they have 3 different ones, which you can pull up fairly quickly. So, I guess anytime I see a storefront grant, I just assume that this is going to be part of the packet because you're asking to restore it to its as close as you can to the original design. So I guess I'm a little.
Well, this is our first
Hesitant.
storefront grant, so after this one, we'll include it in every subsequent one.
Has the staff got an opinion?
No,
So-
we don't.
Okay, so you're not making any recommendation of any kind? Okay.
There are a couple of issues. One is the basis on which you are suggesting the new storefront, which is what Heather brought up. And the second issue seems to me that the Secretary of Interior standards call for a difference between new construction and historic construction. And with your stairwell addition, you are attempting to copy the historic building with new construction. And the application says you're going to match the historic brick. I doubt that that's possible. And so it seems to me that the stairwell addition to this building from an architectural standpoint in dealing with the Secretary of Interior standards is not an appropriate intervention.
In the conversation or in the concept that it'd be a different material than what the original is. So the idea that you would want to juxtapose it as opposed to actually try to match it, because you would never be able to match that brick.
The
Let me speak. So in front of the existing storefront,
Can you identify yourself, please?
I'm Ben Melland with Enclave Development. So the existing building has like a yellow colored brick, one of the really soft bricks that was cast, obviously 100 years ago. So we have 3 pallets of that brick. So if you look at the existing storefront as it exists today, sometime back in the 60s or 70s, they infilled it with a brick that didn't actually match the existing structure. So we have identified bricks that match the existing structure that we have possession of to infill around the existing historic building. So there's like 2 columns and I think it's like the 2 outside columns right now. The bricks that are used are the really thin, like I think they're like 1.5" or 1.7" by like 12 inches. The existing brick is a standard brick size. So we have that to match the old portion of the building. The new stair tower is gonna be a completely separate brick, So it's not gonna, we may have enough to do that tower in a similar fashion, but I don't believe we will get enough of that existing masonry that's been reclaimed to do that. So we're gonna use that as a different element that will stand out so it is different than what the existing masonry is. We also will be cutting holes in the existing building where there was infills, and we can reclaim that masonry as well, so.
The application says that the new stair construction facade will match the existing brick. That's in the application, now you're saying that's not the case.
Well, I mean, there's really no way to get an exact match on that brick, so I would say that that is a misstatement in the application.
The other issue, though, is actually that from this photograph, it appears that the stairwell addition is intended to look like the historic building. And that's what goes against the Secretary of Interior standards. That is, if the new stair addition were to look like the new restaurant addition, it would be a different story. But trying to fake history is what this application looks like.
We will follow the Secretary of Interior standards. 100%.
So then it suggests that you need to come back with a new design.
Sounds good.
Maybe another recommendation is to see if you can put your hands on some older photographs. The NDSU archives is always a great source of that kind of information. So, any further discussion?
I guess a question to the board, would you have any recommendations to make their addition more conforming to the Secretary of State's requirement?
Well, I can tell you what I would do. I'd probably create a glass tower or use glass. It's a very effective way of differentiating between the old and the new, and still can be quite compatible with it. So that's just a suggestion. There are other ways to do that too.
I guess the thought we had discussed was a brick color, darker brick color or something. It's going to be clearly not the existing. Again, one might see that as trying to match history, but it's...
Excuse me, Matt, I'm not sure. Are you a member of the commission or an applicant?
Well, I guess that's why I recuse myself, that I'm
But you're not recusing yourself, so that, I'm
to vote, but the
confused.
conversation is between the board. And if we are to allow the applicant's information to come back with a better design, I think it behooves us to all discuss that.
Yeah, everybody's got ideas on that, but to me, the main thing is that you need to differentiate more clearly between old and new here. Whether stylistically, color would be one way, but you don't want to confuse people by suggesting that part of this was an original piece of the building.
The other thing, I can't quite tell the cladding that's right above the storefront and the historic building. Looks like the same material that's on the addition. Things like that shouldn't happen where this material is the same as that. It would only be applied to the new, so that wouldn't be a historic material.
So it'd have to be a standalone material.
Shall we table this? Invite them to come back?
Well, I would move that the application be continued, I think is the correct term, subject to a redesign that more closely conforms with the Secretary of Interior standards.
I would second that.
Okay, we have a first, a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I do have another question. What looks to be like some kind of copper panel above the transom windows, have you determined if the brick ends at the head of that copper infill or that metal panel infill?
Sorry, what was the question?
This one?
Have you determined that if the brick actually ends here? or-
Yeah, so the, if you look back at the current photo, the McNeilis outfit, that is where the brick does currently end.
Okay, so that's an exposed steel beam that
Correct.
goes across there?
Beneath it, that is a panel, that's a cladding panel currently.
Above the window,
Yeah.
that window framing?
Right. So that would be infilled with the existing brick if you're just to bring it down to that level. Forgive me, I don't recall the exact height that landed at.
Typically, a lot of times, the beams were actually painted and exposed in those situations. But in the old photograph that we have here, it's difficult, we can't really tell from that either, how that was treated, because there's a big sign above those transoms. So I would suggest that you do a little bit more exploration of that particular aspect of this too.
We can do that.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you. For clarification, does this mean we still need a representative at the meeting this afternoon?
Are you talking about the community development?
Yeah, is that it's a completely different commission?
It's a different commission. We'll have someone contact you after this meeting to
Okay.
determine if you need to be there or not.
Sounds good, thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the Historic Overlay District and the draft ordinance of the Jefferson neighborhood.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. My name is Tim Magnuson. I'm with SRF Consulting Group here in Fargo, and we were selected by the City of Fargo to assist them in this historic overlay district for the Jefferson neighborhood. My associate here, Dave Sweeney, has also been working on this project. So I've got a little bit of an overview and a slideshow, and then I guess we'll take whatever questions you may have. This will cover just a little overlay, what the district is, or where the district is proposed to be, why have it, and the standards. When we first looked at this, the Jefferson neighborhood itself is huge. It's a mile square. We thought this was going to be a massive project, but the meetings that were held in 2017 with the neighborhood cut the actual historic district down to about 9.5 blocks of the Jefferson neighborhood. It goes from First Avenue on the north side down to 6th, from 15th Street over to University Drive, and removes all of the Bethany retirement home properties, both on the south side of 2nd and the north side. In total, there's 232, oh, that didn't go where it was supposed to. 232 parcels in the district. And this is just an example of some of the structures that are located within the district. As far as the age of construction in the district, like I said, we've got 232 total properties. 198 were constructed prior to 1940. It's 85% of the structures there are older than that, so it is, I guess, in my opinion, a fairly historic neighborhood. In doing the district, the intent is to provide a zoning tool to protect the architectural and historic significance of the remaining structures, protect and maintain current property values, and also any future investment made into the district, ensure that those values are maintained, and a contribution to the neighborhood's quality of life and the economic vitality of the neighborhood. The special development standards, and I believe you've seen a number of these in the past, they would apply to new and existing structures, primary, accessory, and also demolitions. A certificate of appropriateness is required prior to the issuance of any permit for exterior work. Any interior work would not require a certificate of appropriateness and would not fall under these special development standards. And the last one there is just some of the things that would be looked at: siding, windows, doors, roofs, dormers, entrances, porches, and decks. So any outside work going on that would have an impact on the structure would need a certificate of appropriateness. I do believe that comes through your commission here prior to it being able to obtain a permit from the city of Fargo. That was a quick run through. Like I said, I think you've seen things like this before. This is the newest being proposed, and I would be open for questions myself and I know Fargo staff if there are any questions.
Thank you. Question?
I'm curious, the development standards document, I presume you didn't start from scratch to write this.
No, sir.
I think, first of all, I think it's an excellent opportunity, and the document is really fine and complete. I have a few things that I think should be discussed in detail about language that might be made more clear,
Okay.
because when an issue comes up, things tend to revolve around individual words that are not clear, and if we can clarify some of those, I think in the long run it would be beneficial.
It's one of the reasons we're here today.
I mean, we can discuss this. My thought is that for the things that I noticed that we might further discuss, I'm not sure we should sit around as a committee and do it. Maybe we could meet individually, and I'll give you my thoughts, and you can see if you agree. Maybe a couple of us
Okay.
can meet without having a quorum. And
would
do
be
that.
fine.
May I ask what was the neighborhood reaction to the survey and the implementation of the overlay, or the proposed implementation of the overlay?
Well, the original meeting for this, as I understand it, was back in August 17th of 2017. That was after that meeting, the district was determined. We did have a public meeting on the 6th at Bethany Homes. We had about 25 or 26 people in attendance. It was interesting because we sent out notice for that public meeting, and shortly thereafter, Fargo staff sent out notice for this public meeting, or this meeting.
Oh,
So there was a little bit of confusion as to what was happening. I guess I didn't see that there was major opposition to anything. There were questions as to how will this affect me.
sure.
But for the individuals that were there was no one who stood up and said, no way am I going to stand for this. So I thought, for the people that were there, I believe it was fairly well received.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts, Commission? I think Paul's suggestion is a good one, because we have run into these small gray areas that have created issues for both the homeowners as well as the commission in the past. So I think that's a good suggestion. And I don't know if we need to make a motion to discuss this further, or what the staff might suggest. Yes. Could you please come to the podium, sir? And state your name. Your name again, please?
Phil Grotenhouse.
Thank you.
So, let's see, I'm familiar with 8th and 9th Street. Is that a historical area?
Mhm.
Is that what you're trying to make out of this area here?
I don't know what your question means exactly.
Okay, well, suppose somebody owns a house there. Catches fire, burns down. They're 60 years old. They like the neighborhood. They didn't like their house to begin with. They're old, they gotta go up and down the stairs. They want to build a little ranch-style house there. Can they do that?
I think there's a great, actually, example of this on 8th Street where it was demolished, and it's a cottage ranch style, one story, yes.
Okay, they're not going to be commanded by the city to replace what they had and build another historical house.
No.
No.
Can people who own property in this historical area then opt out of this plan that you have?
I don't believe so. I think once the overlay district is approved, it becomes part of the ordinance.
Okay, 100 years from now, is it still going to, that ordinance still going to be in effect, or can it be removed, or what? Time moves on here, and Fargo is changing fast.
Well, I think the entire ordinance is still a dynamic document, and it's subject to changes, time changes, and needs change. So it's set up initially as a guideline to provide some cohesiveness and some regularity and just regularity, consistency. That's the word I was looking for the city in general. And that's the same thing that the overlay district is doing. It's just taking it a little more to a detailed level.
So what are the positive aspects of this?
I see the positive aspects as myself living in a historic home. I would want to have the character of my neighborhood maintained. I wouldn't want to have something that was inappropriate for the character of the neighborhood to be built next to me, because that would diminish my enjoyment of my personal home. So that's
Yeah.
kind of what this is. It's protecting the people who've restored their homes and who are proud of the heritage of their homes from having something next to them that is going to kind of diminish the enjoyment of the neighborhood.
And to add to that, it actually is shown that a historic overlay raises the property value of your home and surrounding homes in that overlay. So it's purely financial.
Well, I see a lot of homeless people walking around, more than I used to see.
In
Uh,
your neighbor?
Yes, in this area. And I've talked to other people, and they say the same thing.
I'm sorry, can I ask where you live within this neighborhood?
I live next to it.
You're not within this neighborhood.
I'm not within it, but I've talked to people who live within it.
Okay.
So what if, you know, drugs and alcohol are a huge problem, especially for people who are homeless and just walking around?
And part of that, when you encourage a thriving neighborhood and neighbors to continually update their aging homes, it staves off that dereliction to invite people who would wander through neighborhoods that
Or neglect.
Yeah. Would this keep out, say, a drunk house?
I mean, that's a personal decision. It's hard to say one way or the other if they're
Well,
But-
on First Avenue South, there is one. You know, and that's just a couple
That's-
blocks.
That goes
that's a
beyond our
city
commission.
shelter.
Pardon?
That's a city shelter.
Okay. Well,
It's not somebody who has.
you know,
decided
booze and
to
drugs
set
are
up
starting to be a real problem in the community, and if somebody just wanted to open a house for these people to get themselves better, would that be something that would be prohibited?
That's really beyond our purview here, so I think we should wrap this up and move it along. Thank you.
Let me just say, the historic overlay has to do with architecture.
I understand.
The use of the buildings is a separate ordinance from actually what this is.
Mhm. Any other discussion? Did we have a motion?
What's it-
Okay,
Continue your conversation, I think.
yeah,
Um,
so,
So let me suggest, make a motion to continue this application, subject to further conversation about the details of the language.
is there a second?
A second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Moving on to the liaison reports. Christine, have you have anything to
I do not.
report? Matt?
We have not met.
Paul?
House moving board is not met.
Heather?
Housing rehab is not met.
Renaissance Zone Authority, any of the staff comment on the status of that?
I don't think we've had any recent applications, and this month's meeting has been canceled.
Okay, thank you. Other business?
I would have a question about the National Trust Conference, where that stands.
Yeah, and I apologize. I meant to get back to you with our move and everything's been a little hectic. Paul will be going with myself to the National Historic Preservation Conference in November. The reason Paul was selected is because he wasn't able to make the last one, which was in Houston.
Yes.
So we thought it'd be a good opportunity for him to go.
Good. You're here.
You want to go?
No.
Oh,
I
okay.
would- I would, but,
So go this time.
so go, yes, exactly.
Repeat for-
All right. The next meeting is scheduled for October 16th. With that, I guess the meeting's adjourned. Thank you.